Good morning, everybody. It's a bit chilly here today. It's 11 degrees. Well, it was. I think it's got even colder. The wind's picked up, and now we're got that terrible. For those of you in Canberra, it's like the wind off the Brindlebillas. We've got the wind off the Dorigo, so pretty cool. Anyhow, that's from the high country to the low country. We're by the coast, but anyway. Nice and warm. So today we're going to fit some sliding dovetails. Now the technique that I'm using to do this cabinet is a very simple technique. I'll go back to my little camera over here. You can see what I've done so far is I've got the frame put together. Now it's been dovetailed in all the corners. I've cut my trenches for my shelves. I've cut my main trench for the centerpiece, and today what we're going to do is I'm going to cut the dovetails for this section here. So the section that goes through there, that's this piece of timber here, and as you can see I've also got the matching dovetails, so that's going to be set in there. Okay, then I'm going to put my shelving in, and what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to highlight the dovetails, so everything's got dovetails in it. Your dovetails here, all down the front of the shelving, so we're highlighting the dovetails. The framework's been dovetailed together, so everything's going to stay together. Very few nails, screws, well, there'll be no nails, no screws, and just basically a little bit of glue to hold the whole lot together, and the dovetails themselves will do the work. Now, the other thing that I'm trying to achieve is, if you have a look over this side here, I'll just go to a different camera. If you have a look over this side here, what I have is my shelving for all the nuts and bolts and things that you have in a workshop, and as you can see, all the front edges of the shelves are all similar timber to what's in here. So I'm basically matching up all of my colors and types of timber. So that's cedar, this is cedar in all the front edges of the shelving, and so instead of using a complete cedar shelf, which would be very, very expensive, what I'm doing is putting an edge on the timber that I've got around the frame of the cabinet. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. Now, what I'm doing, the way I'm doing that is I'm basically tongue and grooving the two pieces together. Now, you can go along to Carby Tool or some of the recognised places where you will buy router bits, and you can buy a specific router bit for doing tongue and groove. Okay, so I'll show you this. So you can see, oh, better get on the camera, get the right camera. You can see at the end of the board here, you can see where I've got tongue and groove fitted together. Now, for most people in industrial areas, building tongue and groove boards is a fairly simple and easy task if you have the right equipment. Now, not everybody has fancy machinery that they can push their gear through and cut up tongue and grooves. So the simple way of doing it is the way I'm going to do it now. Now, tongue and groove, I could also domino that. I could dowel joint it. There's a whole lot of different ways of doing it. I like to tongue and groove it because the tongue and the groove give a whole lot more support and give you a large gluing surface along the front edge there, so less chance of getting that having it fall apart or shifting or moving or anything like that. Considering that it's going to sit in the shelving here, I'm going to sit the shelves here and I'm going to put equipment on top of it. So it's going to be a little bit of weight involved in what's going to happen there. So a good solid joint with a lot of surface area glued together and something to make it look pretty as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I tongue and groove this, just to give you an idea of a simple way of doing it. And here I have the shelf itself, the piece that I'm going to attach to the front of that, and a little test piece. I'll show you how to do that. So this has been plain square. The first thing I want to do is I want to cut myself a trench in the front edge here. Okay, so, and then I will cut the tongue on this piece of timber here. Now, the tool that I use, that I'm going to use, we'll just bring that camera closer. The tool that I'm going to use to cut the trench in there is a 6mm slot cutter. Now, as you can see, that tool is quite a hefty piece of equipment. Now, it doesn't fit in the hole of the table, it fits above the table. So what we have to do is we have to use a fence that will cover most of that router bit. It looks quite dangerous, doesn't it? But it's not really. And you can get that in varying sizes. This is what they look like when you buy one. Okay, so that's a smaller one. If you can see that one, there's a 4mm. This one's a 6mm or 6.4mm. So they come like that. They don't have bearings on them, and you have to construct it and put it together to give you that result. Okay, this is the same as this one here. TA 700 Carby tool router bit. So if you've got that, just pop that in the router. Do that up. Now, for those of you who haven't seen this before, what I have is a fence. A fence that I've built specifically for the purpose. You'll see that it has a slot in the front of it, which this bit will poke through. On the back of it, you have a cutout here, which is the same diameter as the shank of the router bit. And of course, it's going to go through there. And there's a little bit of a cutout there where the nut's going to feed through. Now, you'll see that it doesn't go all the way across the piece of timber. So the way that works is like this. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the height of the router bit that I have here. Because of the thickness of my material, I'm going to set that at 6mm. And the reason I know that is because I did those other 5 shelves at this. Just got to come up a little bit more. Okay, so I've set that at 6mm from the tabletop. And one way of checking that is find your centre. So the easiest way to find your centre is use your finger gauge, scribe yourself a line down through the centre like so, turn your board around, holding your finger gauge in its right position, and then redo it. You'll notice that I'm a little bit off. That doesn't matter. At least it gives me an idea of where the centre of my board is. Okay, so that's what I was looking for. It was the centre of the board. So then I can set the height of the centre of the board in the centre of the router bit. Okay, so that's how that's done. Now that that's done, as you can see, my router bit is actually covered up. Now, which is really good, because what we don't want is a lot of exposed router bit over the top, over there. So having that on the outside there, a lot safer. Now, I'm going to set that at 10mm. You can set it whatever depth you like. I prefer 10mm. So just bring it out, it's just checking. It's a little bit too much. Like so. You can buy a tongue and groove router bit for this purpose. Those two bits, if you look through the Carby Tool catalogue and find TGB 50 1/2, the router bits that you need to buy two parts. One's the bit that will give you your groove, and the other bit is that makes a tongue on the other piece of timber. So you can buy those. On the other hand, you can go along and you can purchase this monster, which is a tongue and groove router bit, which will do the whole job in one go. And you have to do it to both pieces of the timber. But as you can see, it's quite a significant piece of equipment, and it's a little bit dangerous if you don't use it correctly. So I sort of, if you're a home worker, hobbyist, with limited space, limited machinery and equipment, I would suggest not going to that size piece of gear. It is, like I say, a fairly significant piece of equipment, and you need specialist gear quite often to operate it. So if I move around here, I'm just going to cut this groove. Just try and get out of the way of the camera so that you can actually see what's going on. Let's try this way. I think that might work over that side, which might be better. There we go. So I can just bring that up a little bit. And there you have it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to feed that through. Like so. So here we go. Okay, so ears on, everybody. So turn your sound down. Now, if you're not sure if you've got that in the centre, the easiest way to get it centred is to do this. Flip your piece of timber over and just recut. You can see I have a groove along there. It may not be in the centre, it may be in the centre. It's not a real critical thing that you have perfect in the centre piece of gear, but you can make it centred, and I'll just show you the second bit. So ears on again, everybody. And so all I did then was recut. All I did then was just recut, and now I have a groove down the centre. Okay, so that's basically the rebate. Now all I need to do is to make a tongue on my other piece of timber to fit in that groove. To do that, let's get back to these other cameras. Shift that out of the way. to do that, I'm going to use my tenon cutter, this one here. I'm going to use my tenon cutter from our kit to cut the tongue on the other piece of material. So let's shift that out of the way. Need a different fence. Don't want that fence anymore. Excuse me a sec, I just need to warm up a little bit. It's still a little bit cool here. You might say 11 degrees. Gosh, it's warm. Not when you're acclimatised to the weather here in Coffs Harbour. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the height. So I'm just going to measure the height. Remember, this is right in the middle. I've got 5.5 millimetres. Okay, so I've actually gone a little more than 6. 5.5. So I'll set the height. Oop. Dropped a little bit too much. I've got it at 5 at the moment. The other important thing to remember is that you need to make sure that both pieces of timber are the same thickness. If you don't, you're going to find this a little bit difficult. Okay, I'm just going to readjust that. Wasn't happy with that first set. Okay. A different fence. This one. Same process. Cover up the route a bit. Now, instead of exposing 10 millimetres, wherever I put my ruler, there it is. Instead of exposing 10 millimetres, I'm going to expose 9 millimetres. That extra millimetre will give a little gap between the bottom of the tongue and the bottom of the trench. Always a good idea, just a little bit of space for movement. Okay, now I'm going to do a tester first. So this is all I need for a tester, just a small piece like this. It's adequate for what I want to do. So we'll just do a small cut, and I'll just shift things around again. Tend to spend a lot of time shifting cameras around. Let's have a look at that, see what we've got. There we go. Okay, ears on. Now, it's only small, so a little bit of safety this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little push block. Ears on, everybody. Oop, turned it on. And so that fits in there perfectly. Okay, so no movement. So just a nice clean fit. I probably could take a little less off, which I will do just for that piece. Just adjust it a tiny, tiny little bit. So, and then we are going to cut all the way through our piece of timber. Shift around again. There we go. Okay, ears on everybody. So there's the front of my piece of timber. Okay, so now that will fit. Might just give it a recut. It sort of fits. Just have to recut it, just go over it again. It seemed to have moved a little bit when I was cutting it. Okay, so ears on. Okay, so that's going to fit in there quite nicely. It's just a matter of a little bit of rubbish in there. I just need a piece of sandpaper. Be back in a second. Just a minute. A bit of excess in there, I just need to get out. Take the corner off this. Okay. Just got to get it right. As you can see, just a tiny bit snug, but that's okay. It's not going to do any damage. Just got to make sure it's at level on the ends. And then we'll squeeze that up with the clamp. Okay. Excuse me. Aren't these basic clamps a good idea? Just by doing that, I have that squeezed together nicely. Okay, so if I was gluing that, and I'll glue it later, and no point in gluing it now, as you can see, we have a really nice clean join. You can see it's nice and clean all the way along here, and it's just a matter of running that through the drum sander just to smooth it up. Once you've got the glue on it, and we'll end up with another shelf. So I have to do that shelf. I'll glue that up later, but as you can see, it's quite a simple task if you don't have lots of equipment, lots of fancy machinery to do all the tasks in one go. So, something to think about. So I'll put that aside. And now here's the big part. I just have to be careful I don't hit my camera at the top, because the board itself is quite tall. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut a dovetail to fit in the top and the bottom here of the shelf. So I've got to cut that board correctly. Now the router bit that I'm using to do that is the same one that I used to cut the trenches. That router bit is this one here. That router bit is a 9/16 15-degree angle, so it's actually going to give you a really nice clean dovetail. Okay, it's going to be more of an angle. Most dovetails are around 7 or 8 degrees, so this thing's a little bit 15 degrees, so it's actually a bit tighter, which does two things. Number one, it highlights the dovetail so it's a bit more clear when you look at it, and secondly, it gives it a bit more force when you push the thing together. It gives it a bit more surface area to sort of lock it in. So, very good idea to use something with a bit more of an angle on it. It's Carby Tool T1018 1/2 if you're looking to buy one. So that's the router bit there. Now what we have to do, just put this away so I don't lose it. What we have to do is cut ourselves some test joints to start with. You must make sure that you cut the test joints with the same material that you used to build the product. So what I have is, this is the board. This is the board I'm using for the panel. I've got all the other dovetails cut. If you look closely at it, you can see the dovetails are already cut. The trenches are really nice and straight. And the way I did that was, if you have a look at our first, the first show we did, I cut a board in half after I cut a trench through the middle of it. And I did the same with each of these. So this was one wide board. I cut all my trenches so they're all parallel, and then I cut the board in half so that I ended up with this board and this one here, which is the other side of it. That's how I got those all the same. So that when I fit this to here, these line up with the ones that are there. So that's what we're going to try and do. The thing we have to remember is, and I'll have to bring my other camera over here to show you. The thing that we have to remember is that this trench is not to the bottom of the cabinet like the one that is over there. Okay, so that all goes all the way to the bottom there. This board is going to be a little bit shorter than that, so we had to take a bit off both top and bottom. Okay, so that we have, you know, this little bit here and the bit at the top. So you have to take it off both ends so that all of our trenches line up. Okay, so these two trenches line up with those ones over there. So now what I want to do is I want to make a little dummy joint to see if I can get one of these to fit in here. All right, so that's what I have to do. So it might take a little bit of adjusting, a little bit of setup. So it's a good exercise in adjusting. So let's just put that aside. And have a look at another fence I've got. Now this fence, what I've done is I've built a standard fence and then I've added a bit of support panel at the top of it. I could put in some little triangular pieces here to give it a bit more support. Don't need that because it's quite significant and they're glued together as well as screwed together. So you can see what I've done there. This is designed specifically for this router bit. So if I put that in place, I'm going to shift the camera again in a sec. Oh, that's a squeaky bit, squeaky sound. It sounds like it needs oil, but it doesn't. Now, the critical point with this type of fence my foot coordinate. The critical thing with this fence is you need to make sure that when it's locked down, you have a 90 degree, it's 90 degrees to your table. Very important that that's what you do. Okay, so 90 degrees. And check it regularly just to make sure that it's correct. And then we have to worry about the height of the router bit. So we take a measurement. Take a measurement of the depth of the trench. And that's 7.5 mil. No, it's actually 8 millimeters. I set the height of my router bit to 8 mil. So. So I've set that at 8 millimeters. So my height is at 8 millimeters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to creep up on the cut. Okay, so I don't want to take too much off. The beauty about using the beauty about using a piece of offcut is if it's not right, I just trim the end off it and start all over again. Okay, so it's a piece of offcut, and the idea is to run straight across here. Just got to get that right. I'm just taking a tiny little bit off. Okay, I'm not taking much off. I'm just setting it like it's very, very small. See that? You can see it's just exposed it a little bit. Okay, I just want to. All I want to do is just start. So I lock the fence in. If you're not sure about holding that steady, and you're not quite sure whether it's right or not, or you want something, a little bit of pressure on this side of the fence, you can use a push block and just hold the push block there as you work across it. Okay, so it's just a matter of putting the block on here like that and pushing it sideways and moving it across your piece of timber, or you can set yourself another fence. So get one of your other fences, set that in there, like so, and you can just push that straight across. Just lock that down with a couple of clamps. I'm not going to do it with this piece here. I might do it with the vertical bit, the big bit, but with this one here, I'm just going to do a push block system, and we'll just push that across. Okay. So, ears on everybody, here we go. Now, I'm not concerned if it doesn't work properly. All I'm going to do is it's a test joint just to make sure I get things right and get my fence set up in the right place. So, try and make sure that when you do this, just take little bits at a time. You don't need to take a whole lot. You can set and measure. I just like to sort of try and test it as I go. Okay, so ears on. You can see I've started my cut. Bit of rough stuff there. Do the other side. And there's my dovetail. Now all I do is to test that. So let's get my piece of timber over here. This is a bit awkward. Okay, so that's not going to fit, and the reason it doesn't fit is because I haven't taken enough material off, which is good. So shift that out of the way again. So all I do now is just shift out a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit more off. Now remember, what you take off one side, you take off the other, it doubles it up. So you only need to do half of your set. We go again. See, that's quite a nice set. So as you saw there, I only took a tiny little bit off, so it was just a little bit at a time. Go and do another test. Okay. Now, I only took a small amount off. It was just bee's knee. Too much flops around. All right. So I'm just going to take that back a tiny little bit. And this may take you 3 or 4 goes. Just take that back a little bit. And I can use the other end of the board. So ears on. Do another test. And we've still taken not enough off. It's nearly there. I don't want that, just readjust. Now it may be that there are 100 other ways of doing this. I find this quite simple because I don't have a lot of equipment, a lot of machinery to do stuff. So I have to figure out ways of getting around problems that I have. And one of the problems, even if I want a nice fancy piece of gear and a fancy shelf system, I've still got to figure out some way of doing it so that it looks nice, looks professional, and fits in with the rest of the decor. I could go along to a cabinet maker's store, workshop, and get to use all their fancy gear and get the measurements right, everything happening right at once. But I don't want to do that. I want to do that at home, do it here at home. So now I'm going to just dock off one of these. So here's on everybody. I just got to go to this table saw. I'll dock this bit off. If you think about it, you know, in today's world where everybody has all the fancy gear and equipment, machinery, it's only the people who can afford it that have got it. But in past years, all this was done by hand, and I can imagine standing here with a plane and just planing little bits and pieces off to get a visual effect of dovetails showing up. So I've shifted that a little bit. I'll do a recut. Here's on. A little bit furry around the edges, but it's still fine. So now we just refit. Give it another go. And now we're looking like we're getting there. Okay, so I took it back. Oh, look at that. It just... I reckon if I recut that over the saw, just file off some of those furry bits because that's what's catching things. It's catching on all of that. Might just recut. You must. So it looking pretty good this time. So here's on everybody. That could be just about it, I think. Let's try that. Yes. Let's try it in a couple of the others. It's in there. Let's try it in this one. Fits in there. And the most important one is the one that it's going to go in, which is this one here. So that's going to fit into that dovetail there, and this one up here. As you can see, that fits beautifully. Actually, I could take a little bit less off. Just make it that little bit more snug. That one doesn't fit. Might take a little bit more off. A bit less. Just readjust that a tiny little bit, just to make it a little bit better. Now to do the main board, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run the board over the same system. Okay, so it will go over exactly the same thing, and then with a bit of luck that will fit together. Yeah. So remember, now we've got something that's going to be rocking back and forth, all this sort of thing. So you've got to make sure that you're stable up here. I could make up a jig that would hold that in place, but I've only got to do two, this one and that one. Okay, the other smaller ones are easier to hold, which is the end of the shelves. So what I'd like to do this time is I'm going to put a brace across here, just to give me a little bit more support at the bottom. So that's what this one's for. So if I sit that in there, clamp that in place. Just going to make sure it fits on the outside, outfeed. This is where I need 3 pair of hands. Okay, so it's going to fit on the outfeed. So all I need to do now is just feed through here. I'll just bring that in, feed a little bit more. And you can buy a fancy piece of gear that's got flexible supports that will do this. You can go there, but I don't have any. So I'm just going to make sure that things don't move on me while I'm working through here. All right, I'll just shift this out of the way a little bit. Just clamp. That way my fingers aren't going to get involved, and it's just a matter of push that through there. Okay, so here's on everybody. And there I have my perfect dovetails on both ends. So all I'm going to do now is tidy up the ends of them. So that little piece of sandpaper that I had. Just tidy up the furry bits off them. Just to make sure nothing gets caught in there. And the litmus test will be having a little fit. By doing the test joint, we probably did get it right. We may need to feed it through again, just to see how it goes. Okay, so that's the front of my board. Here we go. Hope I've got my length right. The length is right. I've squeezed it up with the other board, with the other goes in. It's going in, folks. I think I might have to pull it down to actually fit it, but it does fit. So over the next couple of days, you can see at the top I'm warped in a little bit like this, so it's underneath. So I've got to take the clamp off that I've got up the top there and fit the thing together. I wonder if I can just loosen it off. Take a bit of pressure off it. Might give me the chance to get it in there. Ah, look at that. Okay. As you can see, it does fit. And I'm going to have to leave things there, folks, because we're getting close to finishing. And I'm just going to... There's some sawdust caught in there, so I have to pull it down to get it to fit. So basically, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there, and when we come back next week, you'll see I'll have it fitted, and we'll start looking at fitting the shelves. The shelves will be a little bit easier to fit, basically because we only have to go across here, and we're going to use the same technique to cut dovetails back in front of these. Okay, so I have to do those. I've got one other board that I have to dress up, which is the last one that I built earlier in the show. So we'll get that to fit. Won't be a second. It's all about how that's adjusted at the top. It's a bit squeezed together, and I don't have time to pull it all down at the moment. So we're going to leave it there, and I'll catch you all again next week. So if you're watching Dave's, he's going to fit the other half of his French cleat to the wall today, and he's got a couple of integral parts to his little station to put together. So if you've enjoyed what flip over to him after me. But if you've enjoyed what you've seen today and you haven't subscribed to me, subscribe, press the bell, press a couple of thumbs up, give me some enthusiasm to keep going. I'm pretty enthusiastic anyway, so we'll see you all next week, and hopefully it'll be a little bit warmer. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's going in further into winter and it's going to get a lot colder. But anyway, see you all next week, and enjoy your week. And Pammy says see you later. She has the flu at the moment. It's not COVID, but it's just the flu. So she's very quiet at the moment. But anyway,